Hello and welcome back. We will now cross-examine the heart of Lee Irons' core thesis on the righteousness of God. His goal was to refute Hermann Cremer, a dominant influence on the new perspective on Paul. In what follows, I will first offer a brief sketch of Cremer and Irons' views. Then in section 4.2, I will critique his analysis of Cremer, as well as his own definition of God's righteousness. Cremer defines the righteousness of God as thoroughly God's saving justice, justitia salutatifera. For him, it never refers to distributive justice, but always to God's activity in delivering the oppressed and the people of God. Quote, his judicial righteousness is salvific and stands in the closest connection with his goodness and faithfulness, so that righteousness and faithfulness are synonymous, and that righteousness and grace can stand in parallel. One must only observe that the proper purpose of God's righteousness activity or judging is not negative, but thoroughly positive, not punishment, but the defense of right, the defense of those who are in the right." Unquote. Contra his contemporary Emil Couch, who saw righteousness as part objective physical norm and part spiritual standard of judgment, Cremer saw things radically differently. For him, righteousness isn't conformity to an abstract ideal or norm in that sense. Instead, it is Verhältnisbegriff, that is, a relational concept, where righteousness fulfills the demand of the covenant relationship between God and his people. For Cremer, if there's a norm at all, it's this covenant relationship. Now, Irons rightly takes issue with Cremer's exclusive definition. He points out that several key passages feature a Gerichtsdoxology, a sort of court confession of the righteousness of God, who judges not only the sins of the nations, but also those of Israel. For example, Nehemiah says, "Yet you have been righteous in all that has come upon us, for you have dealt faithfully and we have acted wickedly." We also see this most vividly in Psalm 7, 11, 50, and 129, which clearly link God's righteousness with his judgment of Israel. Psalm 50, for example, says, "Let the heavens declare his righteousness, for God is judge. What right have you to declare my statutes, or take my covenant in your mouth, seeing you hate instruction and cast my words behind you? Now consider this, you who forget God, lest I tear you to pieces." Or take Isaiah 42. "The Lord is well pleased for his righteousness' sake. He will exalt the law and make it honorable. Who gave Jacob for plunder and Israel to the robbers? Was it not the Lord, he against whom we have sinned?" While Cremer would likely see judgment on Israel's enemies as an expression of his covenant faithfulness to Israel, his position cannot account for this unmistakable divine retribution on unfaithful Israel itself. This is nothing else but punishment proper, which Cremer wrongly denies. So Irons is correct to argue that he and the new perspective on Paul go too far in restricting God's righteousness to a positive saving righteousness. This brings us to Irons' view. For Lee Irons, the righteousness of God is God's justice in executing judgment on the enemies of his people, and thereby vindicating his people in the face of their oppressors. Thus, it can refer to either the act of punishing Israel's enemies, or the deliverance that results when Israel's enemies are thus extinguished and Israel is vindicated. It is best understood in light of the judicial context of legal controversy, so that it is precisely justitia distributiva. Simply put, for Irons, the righteousness of God is distributive justice. Note, this is his sole lexical definition. Contra Cremer, Irons is anxious to emphasize that while the Greek Dick group words can refer to covenantal relationship, the words themselves do not have covenantal relationship as part of their lexical sense. For example, in Psalm 98, "He has remembered his steadfast love and faithfulness to Israel" is covenant righteousness, but this is only a covenantal discourse concept for Irons. The lexical sense as he sees it is purely judicial or legal. Or consider Isaiah 45:8, "Drip down, O heavens, from above, and let the clouds pour down righteousness. Let the earth open and salvation bear fruit." Here, Irons argues that the parallel between righteousness, or tzedek, and salvation doesn't mean that righteousness should be translated as salvation or deliverance, because that would introduce a redundancy. Then he states, "Nor should the discourse of saving righteousness be read into the lexical concept. This becomes a mantra of sorts. He repeats it when analyzing Isaiah 51:5. My righteousness is near, my salvation has gone forth. For Irons, while salvation is present in the broader context as discourse concepts, it is not part of the lexical sense of the word. Recall from our first episode that he uses the Ogden-Richards triangle to posit a hard distinction between sense and reference. Salvation here is a discourse concept, not a lexical meaning. In his world, discourse concepts aren't really conveying meaning, they're just glosses. But as we saw when we reviewed his lexical model, this doesn't work with polysemic and abstract words. So to summarize, for Cremer, the righteousness of God is only a positive salvific concept. Irons holds to the exact opposite view. It is only a judicial or legal concept. In section 4.2, we will cross-examine his analysis and uncover 3 key mistakes with far-reaching consequences. Onwards and upwards.